Last time we talked about two states and two states, out of which we connected, we covered the two states concept. So does anybody remember what is the difference between engineering space and two states? What is the difference between engineering space and two states? Engineering space is what we measured in your strength of material tensile test. What is the difference between engineering space and two states? So space is force by area. So is there any difference in force or difference in area? So force is same in both cases. Area in one case is engineering space, it is original area. And the two states, the area considered is the instantaneous area. So that is what we consider. We just take the same figure what we used earlier. Now today we will describe the concept of two strain. So we will use the same figure. So this is the expression finally we got for the two stress in terms of engineering stress and engineering strain. Now the concept of true strain is somewhat more complicated in the sense instead of considering the original length, the engineering strain is the total elongation. So whatever is delta L divided by original length. So engineering strain is defined as the change in length divided by original length, so that is L naught. So that is the definition of engineering strain. The true strain, we have to consider the instantaneous length of the specimen at any moment. So original length was L naught, it started elongating and finally it became L1. So that is what it was happening. So original length was L naught and it got elongated to some length, let's call it L dash 0, and at that instance there was some small change in this particular length, so I call it as delta L dash. After some time this L naught become larger, so whatever this L naught to L naught plus delta L, so this delta L I am splitting into some subcomponents, so whatever is this delta L, the difference, I am just splitting it into multiple subcomponents. So the first one is delta L dash and so on. After some time, the length become L0 double dash and this is called delta L double dash. So at this instant, the strain would be, or the incremental strain would be delta L dash divided by L0 dash. So that is the incremental strain at this instant. The next instant, the length has become more because this delta dash will get added to the original length. So this would be larger. And after that, it got further elongated. So there is further incremental strain. If you add up all these incremental strain, that is defined as true strain. So the true strain is addition of all incremental strains and what is the incremental strain at any instance. So if you divide this into n number of segments, so if you divide this particular growth in length into let's say 10 number of segments, during each of this 1/10 of the segment, there will be some instantaneous length and there will be some instantaneous growth in the length because of the load being gradually being applied. So the instantaneous ratio is called as the incremental strain. If you add up all the incremental strains from original length to the final length, you will get some summation, and that summation is called as a true strain. So it is the addition of all incremental strains gives us the true strain. So how to calculate this? So mathematically, if this number of segments, number of increments, if you start increasing, this summation can be written in the integral form. So you can write the true strain. Instead of summation, I will be using the integral. So delta L by L. So the ratio of increment in length, which is dl, divided by the length at that particular instance. So length is varying at every instance. So what will be the limits of this variation integral? So we want to calculate this summation of delta L by L from beginning to end. So what would be the limits of this integral? So when you begin, what is the value of L? L is L naught. So you start with L naught, and when you reach the final end, what is the length at that particular time? So that is L plus L naught, or L naught plus delta L. So that is the final length that we are getting. So that is how the true strain would be calculated. Anybody knows what is the integral of 1 by L? Log n to the base. It is a natural log. So it is log n from L naught to L naught plus delta L. So epsilon true can be written as log of L naught plus delta L minus log of L naught. So that can be written as L naught plus delta L divided by L naught. Right? So it is definite integral. So if you substitute the limits, you will get this answer, which can be written by the log rule as this particular ratio. Now can you tell what this particular ratio, can you write this ratio in terms of engineering strength? It is 1 plus engineering strength, that's right. So if you distribute this, it is 1 plus delta L by L naught. So get the expression for true strain as in terms of engineering strain as given by this particular equation. So now using these conditions, we can now calculate the true stress as well as true strain if you know engineering stress and engineering strain using the expressions that we have got. Now if you plot just for the comparison state between engineering stress and engineering strain, if I plot here on x-axis strain and on y-axis stress, the regular engineering stress strain curve is, we know that it is of this type. So since towards the break you will find that we are not considering the reduction area, that is the necking effect we are not considering, so you will find that load will go down. If you plot the true stress strain curve, it will look different. In the elastic region, it will almost follow the original curve, slightly above the engineering stress strain curve. But in the plastic region, you will find substantial difference, and it will always keep on increasing. So this is true stress strain. And the black color is the engineering stress strain. So that is how the engineering stress strain would look like. What is the application of this concept? The most widely used application, or where you must use true stress strain, is where you are having larger deformation. If it is a small strain problem, that is you are in the elastic region, it hardly makes any difference whether it is true or engineering, because the difference is very small, but it becomes very large when you are in the plastic zone. So when you are solving any problem that are involving large strains, the application of this true stress strain. Can anybody think of any application where you are having very large strains?
Deep drawing.
Deep drawing. So that is right. So manufacturing processes, so deep drawing. So if you are analyzing deep drawing operation, you want to simulate deep drawing operation, you have to use true stress strain curve. Another common application is the crash analysis, where some body is impacting and there is a large plastic deformation. Again, you will have to use the true stress strain properties. In general, if you are using any finite element software, when it asks for stress strain data, if you have to supply stress strain data, it is always to be supplied in the true strain rather than engineering stress strain. So when material property data comes to you, it will be in the engineering form, because the test report will be in terms of engineering stress and engineering strain. But if you are doing any finite element analysis, then you will have to use the true strain. That is in general any FEM software. If you are doing in the elastic zone, you require only modulus of elasticity and nu. You don't have to supply stress strain curve. But if you are doing any nonlinear analysis, you will have to supply the stress strain curve, which has to be supplied as an engineering stress, not engineering stress, but true stress and true strain curve. So you have to supply this red curve rather than this one. And how to convert the test data to this, we have seen through this equation. So using that, you can convert the engineering to the true stress strain data. Okay, so any questions on this topic? So let's proceed to a new topic. So till now we have seen stress analysis, that is the analysis of stress, and we later on move to analysis of strain. So these are the two topics we have covered. Now we already know from the strength of material that stress and strain, they are not independent. So they are connected to how many parameters? So is there any relation between stress and strain? What is the relation between stress and strain? We just do that stress strain curve. Stress by strain equal to modulus of elasticity. So that is also known as, it is known as some law. So what is that law called as? So what is this called? Yeah, E is called as a modulus of elasticity, but this equation as such is called as Hooke's law. It's called as a Hooke's law. So this is one form, and is same for all materials? The modulus of elasticity, is it same for all materials? It is not. So it changes from one material to another material. So the way stress and strain are coupled to each other will be different for different materials. If you consider steel, for a certain value of stress, we will have a different value of strain than that for the copper. So that is the thing that we have to remember. If you generalize this particular concept, what we get is known as the constitutive equations. It is also called as the generalized Hooke's law. So what the generalized Hooke's law does, is we have got 6 stress components. So we have got stress components as sigma x, sigma y, sigma z, and then tau xy, tau yz, and tau xz. And similarly, we have 6 strain components. So that is epsilon x, epsilon y, epsilon z, and then similarly gamma xy, and so on. So these are 6 components. So here we got equation which is typically used for one-dimensional problem where stress and strain, you have tensile bar or some very simple situation. You can apply it. We are dealing with 3-dimensional bodies. You have to generalize this particular form of equations, which is what is we are trying to discuss now. So relationship between these, so the constitutive equation are approximate relations the stress components and the strain components. So here it is important to understand that these components, these particular constitutive equations that we are talking about, they are not accurate in the sense they don't have any physics-based derivation as such. We only know that based on the experiment and observation, the stress is in general directly proportional to strain up to yield point. So we know that up to yield point this particular law holds good. And in general it works properly for certain material like copper, steel, so they obey this law perfectly. So, but in general, whatever constitutive equations we have formed, they are approximate. So this is also an approximation of an experimental observation that the stress is more or less directly proportional to strain. And for our practical problem purposes, this particular approximation is good enough. Similarly, the generalized equations that we are going to discuss, they are also approximately true, but the approximation level is such that it is okay for most of the practical situations. If you have very specific and accurate analysis, then you have to actually conduct experiment, obtain the stress versus strain variation, and that would be law for that particular equation. Those data points that you obtain, that is law for that particular equation. So in general, the engineers won't have that much time as well as money to do this kind of experimental based analysis every time. So there are the constitutive equations such as Hooke's law, which fills up the gap in more or less reasonable time. Whatever uncertainty is there, that gets covered in the concept of factor of safety that the engineers use in their design. Now, in order to, we already know some kind of relationship between stress and strain. So you have considered in your strength of material class, the strain if a particular body is subjected to some stress sigma x and sigma y. So consider a case, a particular bar which is pulled in both the directions, and we have to calculate what is the strain in x direction. So what would be the equation for this strain in x direction in terms of sigma x and sigma y? Okay, first imagine that sigma y is not there. What would be the equation here? If only sigma x is there, what would be sigma x in terms of sigma y? Sigma x in epsilon x in terms of epsilon in terms of sigma x. So it is sigma x divided by. Okay, so that is the equation what we have. Now what we are introducing is sigma y here. So there will be some additional component. So when sigma y equal to 0, this particular equation becomes as this form. So there is some additional term which will come here, which you already know. So we have seen that this is the material property, modulus of elasticity. There is one more property which is related to this particular term. It's the Poisson's ratio. So when you apply the sigma y in the transverse direction, assuming this is longitudinal, it will elongate in this direction, but there is the Poisson effect because of which it will change in dimension in the x direction. So when you pull in the y direction, what happens in the x direction? It expands or contracts? It contracts. So when you are considering sigma y, the total strain in x direction, if sigma was not there, it will be sigma x by E. Because sigma y is there, there will be some reduction in the strain in x direction. So how do you calculate that reduction? So what is Poisson ratio? It is a ratio of lateral to longitudinal strain. So how do you calculate this particular component? So it will be subtraction. That's right. So transverse strain in this particular case is sigma y by E. So that is the longitudinal strain in the transverse direction. So in the original longitudinal direction, you will have the strain which is given as nu times. So if it elongates in this direction with sigma y by E, it will contract in the transverse direction by nu times this particular component. So that is the strain in x direction would be given by this particular equation. So this is what in the strength of material we have already come across earlier. We can generalize this for 3 dimensions as epsilon x. So instead of a rectangular plate, if you consider a cube here and all 3 faces of the cube are pulled in the direction, you will get the equation which is sigma epsilon x equal to sigma x by E minus nu times sigma y by E minus nu times sigma z by E. So that is the equation we'll get. So strain in x direction would be given in terms of this set of equations where E and nu are the material constants. So depending on which material, these 2 components will be related. Can somebody tell me what would be the equation for epsilon y, the strain in y direction in terms of again sigma x and all? So it will be minus nu sigma x by E plus sigma y by E minus nu sigma z by P. And similarly, you can write epsilon z as minus nu sigma x by E minus nu sigma y by E and minus plus sigma z by E. So that is how for linear elastic material, the strain components are getting related to stress components. Similarly, there are relation for the shear stress and shear strain. So what is the relation between shear stress and shear strain? So there is another material constant which comes in picture. Modulus of rigidity, which we use the term G for that particular case. So in that case, gamma xy equal to tau xy, the shear stress divided by G. So in this case, there is no Poisson effect comes in the shear strain. There is no concept of Poisson ratio. It is simply gamma xy directly depends on tau xy. So other shear stresses don't influence the angular deformation in xy plane. So it is only influenced by the shear stress which acts in that particular plane. So we have gamma xy equal to tau xy by G, gamma yz equal to tau yz by G, and gamma xz equal to tau xz by G. So that is, so here we are related all strain components with all stress components. So that is what we wanted. We wanted to relate all the strains to all the stresses or vice versa. So this particular set of equations is for a linear elastic material set of constitutive equations. So these are the constitutive equations for a linear elastic material. Okay, so let's recap what we have done here. So we wanted to have a general relation between stress and strain in three-dimensional case where there are 6 unique stress and strain components. In order to do that, we started with a two-dimensional case scenario where we already knew the solution of strain in terms of the two stress components which were acting here. And we generalized it to 3 dimensions. So here epsilon x got related to all the 3 normal stress components in xyz directions. Note that the epsilon x does not depend on tau xy or tau yz. So this particular equation, whatever is the shear stress only cause distortion or change of angle, doesn't cause any elongation or contraction. So that's why the shear stress term doesn't come in picture here. Only the normal stress components are coming here. Similarly, the shear strains, they are independent of the normal stress. So whatever elongation happens, pure elongation doesn't cause any change in angle of the body. So that is why there are no normal stress terms here. Only the shear stress terms relate to shear strain terms. So this is a form of a constitutive equation for this particular case. You can write these equations in the matrix form, and that is how generally the constitutive equations are written. So if you write these equations in the matrix form, you will get in the following way. So here we have epsilon x, epsilon y, epsilon z, gamma xy, gamma yz, and gamma xz multiplied by how many equations are there? These are how many total equations? So there are 6 unique strain or stress components. So there will be 6 components. So there will be some matrix which relates to stress and strain. So whatever equations we have seen here, we have to just translate it into this particular matrix form. So can you tell what will be the first row here? Epsilon x equal to sigma x into this, sigma y into second, like that. So what will be the terms which will come in the first row? So it will be 1 by e minus a by e. What will be the third component? So first is 1 by e, then nu by e, and here also minus nu by e. And then we have the shear stress component, tau xy, tau yz, tau xz. So is epsilon x depending on tau components? They are not. So this would become 0, 0, 0. In the second, you will have minus mu by e, minus plus 1 by e, minus mu by e, 0, 0, 0, minus mu by e, minus mu by e, 1 by 0, 0, 0. So these are the first 3 equations. Now the fourth equation is gamma xy equal to tau xy by g. So how it will appear in the fourth row? So corresponding to sigma x, sigma y, sigma z, we don't have no terms for sigma x, sigma y, sigma z. So it will be 0, 0, 0. What would be the term which will come here? That is 1 by 3. And then 0, 0. Because gamma xy depends only on tau xy. So there will be only one term which will come here. Similarly, the other rows will be so this is the constitutive equation for linear elastic. Why linear elastic? Because we have considered here the relation as sigma x by E. So this particular relationship is valid only in the linear zone up to yield strength of the material. So beyond that, this particular relation is not valid. Means stress is not directly proportional to strain beyond the yield point. So whenever you are talking about linear elastic, only then this particular set is valid. And also we are considering the E value. If you notice here, the E value, that is the equation that we are using, sigma x equal to epsilon x equal to sigma x by E. Here we are saying epsilon y equal to sigma y by E. So the E is not changing. So if you pull in x direction, whatsoever elongation you will get for a certain force, if you pull in y direction, same elongation you will get. So what is that property called? If you pull the E value in x direction is same as E value in y direction. So what is that property called as? Isotropic material. So this particular set of equation is also valid for, so it is linear elastic and isotropic material. Okay, so that is the set of equations that we obtained in this particular case, which are valid for linear elastic and isotropic material. So in order to define the constitutive equations for linear elastic isotropic material, how many material constants we require? How many? So what you see in this matrix, they are all material constants, they are material properties. G and E. What about mu? Mu is a material property or it is not? Poisson's ratio, does it depend on materials? For steel, Poisson ratio is same as the Poisson ratio for rubber. It is not. Every material has got a unique Poisson ratio. So the material properties, so this particular case you require three material properties. E, nu and G. So those are the properties required. Now, are these three unique properties? So E, nu and G, are they independent of each other or there is some relationship between them? There is a relationship between them. So what is the relation? So there is a relation between E and G, the modulus of elasticity and G. So there is a relationship G equal to E divided by 2 into 1 plus mu. So I don't expect, you might have done this in the strength of material, but I don't expect you to remember it. So that is the relationship, that is one which you are using. So although there are written here three material properties, there are actually two unique properties. So for linear elastic isotropic material, you require only two material properties, either E and nu or E and G or nu and G. So any of the two can fully define the constitutive equations, that is any of the 6 strain components can be related to any of the 6 stress components by using this particular matrix. Now we can generalize this. So this particular equation, set of equations is specific to a particular type of material or a particular simplification that one does in solid mechanics, because most of the materials can be fitted into this approximation. They obey this particular approximation to some extent, and hence we can use these equations. For most of the undergraduate classes, we will be using these equations. But in general, you will have this full 6 by 6 matrix with valid entries, which is applicable to any general material. So if your material is not linear, not elastic, and it is not isotropic, then the zero terms will start appearing in the equation, and that is called as the generalized Hooke's law or the generalized constitutive equations. So the generalized Hooke's law will relate the 6 stress components and 6 strain components. By a matrix which is 6 by 6. So we can call this as A11, A12, up to A16. Then A21, second row, second, up to A26. A61, A62, up to A66. So in general, any general material which is not isotropic, not linear elastic, can be related to stress and strain. If you want to give constitutive equations, if you want to model that material for your application, so typically these materials will be like composite materials or more advanced materials. You will require the constitutive equations which will have 36 constants. It can be proved that this particular matrix will always be a symmetric matrix. That means the diagonal terms, so across the diagonal term, so you have A11, A22, A33 up to A66, and then you have A21 up to A16, A26. So this matrix is always symmetric. So you really don't require 36. It can be proved that for the solid materials, this particular matrix is symmetric. So in that case, how many unique constants you require? What will be? How many terms will come here? So total there are 36 terms. You remove the diagonal 6 terms. So remaining are 16, 30 terms are remaining. Out of 30, 15 will be above diagonal, 15 will be below diagonal. So now 15 plus 6, so you require 21 unique material constants. So any general material will require 21 unique constants. To define fully the stress strain behavior of that particular material. And this constitutive equation need not be written with strain equal to stress. They can be, you can invert this matrix and take the strains on the other form. So you will have sigma x, sigma y, and so on. So another form of constitutive equation is stress in terms of strain. So the constitutive equations can be provided either in terms of strain in terms of stress or stress in terms of strain. So they are one and the same. If you invert this matrix and take to other side, you will get this particular matrix. Okay, so this is the form of constitutive matrix, and the terms which are there in this matrix, they are material constants. So Aij or Bij, they are the material constants. Which are 21 in number in general. Now, if you are considering the material as homogeneous, these constants will remain same anywhere. So if you want to decide what is the stress strain relationship at the right hand side of the table, the same relationship of the same material constants will be valid on the right hand side or anywhere on this table if this table is homogeneous. If the material is not homogeneous, then in that case, this Aij and Bij, they will be function of the location. So from point to point, so here these values are constant. So 1 by E, mu by E, so those are the constant terms. But if the material is not homogeneous, then here it will be 1 by E1, here it will be at another point. So at one point it will be 1 by E1. If you move to the another spot on the table, it will become 1 by E2. So that is what is the relationship. So this particular constitutive equations can become non-linear if your material is non-homogeneous. So in general, it can consist of material constants if the material is homogeneous, but if the material is non-homogeneous, if the property change with respect to location, then these constants are no more constant, but they will be, each of them will be function of location. So modulus of elasticity will change at different locations and so on. So this is, for us, it is only exposure to what could be generalization of any material. So if you are trying to analyze some non-homogeneous material, then in that case, this particular stress-strain relationship take much more complex form. So if you have to simulate behavior of some non-homogeneous material, so for example, rock or concrete, or in mechanical terms, some perforated bar. So in that case, this matrix needs to be defined properly before you start analyzing it. Or you do simplification, that's what most of the time we do. We approximate that non-homogeneous material as approximately some average property we will consider and go ahead with the analysis of that particular term. There is also a special class of material which we should be aware of. They are called as orthotropic materials, where this particular equation takes one special form. So this orthotropic material, they have got material symmetry along three orthogonal directions. So they have material symmetry. A good example of this is a rolled plate. So for manufacturing of the plates, you start with ingot and then you start rolling it till it becomes flatter and flatter. So whenever you are manufacturing a plate, when you get the final plate, it is rolled between the rollers to get in the longitudinal direction. The length of the plate will be the rolling direction. So we'll have, let's say this is the rolling direction. So we are calling this as a rolled plate, which is the common material used for most of the engineering structures. So we will have properties which are different in a particular direction. So in this direction, let's call this as x direction, we will have certain properties. So that is called as a rolling direction. Perpendicular to rolling direction, it is called as a transverse direction. You will have different material properties. And in the third direction, that is the thickness direction, you will have a third set of properties. So in the x direction, you will have certain value of Ex. In the y direction, you will have another value Ey. And in the z direction, you will have third direction Ez. So if you align your coordinate system in the direction of the rolling of the plate, this particular set of equations, you don't require in that case 21 constants. So in that case, this particular matrix takes the form as follows. So there are 6 diagonal terms. So first 3 corresponds to the modulus of elasticity, last 3 corresponding to modulus of rigidity. In addition to that, you will have A12, A13, A23, and remaining all terms are 0. And the rest part is symmetry. So for orthotropic material, the total number of unique constants that you require are not 21, but they are diagonal 6 terms plus the 3 non-diagonal terms corresponding to the normal stresses. So total 9 number of constants are required. So for this material, 9 unique material constants are required. So that is just a separate scenario, just to give an example how this particular constitutive equation take a different form for different types of material. So that is being explained by this particular case. So to recap, what we have done here is we have learned stresses separately, strains separately, but they are not independent of each other. They are related to each other by what is known as constitutive equations. And these constitutive equations, in order to define them properly, you require 21 unique constants. And these constants belong to general material. And these laws are called as the generalized Hooke law or the generalized constitutive equations. For the most simplified version of the material, that is the linear, elastic, isotropic and homogeneous material, you require simply 2 material constants in order to fully define the relation between stress and strain. So that is what you have been doing till now. But if you want to do more accurate analysis or you are dealing with more complex materials, so most common material is the rolled plate, which falls into category what is called as the orthotropic material. Many of the composite materials will also fall in the category of the orthotropic material, where depending on the orientation of the fibers that are used to lay the composite materials, you will get the properties of orthotropic material, which require 9 material constants. In general, the most complex form of the material, where it is not isotropic and not linear, you will have total 21 constants in order to fully define this particular material. So that is the theory of the constitutive equations, which we will use it only for the theoretical purpose. We are not going to build any analysis based on this advanced material models. But as a student of solid mechanics, you should be aware of how these 6 stress components are related to the 6 strain components. So that is what we have covered in this particular topic. So any questions or doubts in this case? Okay, so let's now take the third topic. We'll begin another topic. We have 5 more minutes. So we'll just initiate one particular new topic. So next 2-3 lectures we will be dealing with axisymmetric bodies and their analysis. So there are many engineering structures whose geometry can be obtained by revolution of some cross section about an axis of revolution. So those are called as axisymmetric bodies. So the geometry can be generated by revolving some cross section about an axis. So can you give example of such things? So you have some axis and you have some cross section. So if you revolve this cross section about this particular you will get an object which is called as an axisymmetric body. So can you think of examples of these axisymmetric bodies. So what bodies we can obtain by revolving a cross section, which are used in practice? There are many such examples. Pipes, that's right. So pipes or tubes is one example. There is a rectangle which is revolved around the circle. What else? I think you will get more examples. Cone type funnel, that's right. We have funnel which is so you have this cross section. If you revolve this, you will get a funnel which is cone type. What other objects, engineering objects, can be obtained by revolving a cross section? Spherical object, if a balloon, spherical balloon or spherical container. So if you take a semicircle, revolve it. If it is a hollow, then also it is axisymmetric. If it is solid, if it is a solid ball, then also it is axisymmetric. What I have drawn here is container, but it need not be. Anything else comes to your mind?
Transmission shafts. Transmission shafts.
Okay, so shafts also could be a case. So if you consider a shaft, so it will have a varying cross section. So I am considering solid shaft, it also could be hollow shaft. So this could be the cross section. If you revolve this, you will get shaft with different dimensions. So these steps are required in order to mount either rollers or bearings or gears onto this particular shaft. Again, specifically for the shafts, it is not purely axisymmetric. So can somebody tell why shafts are not purely axisymmetric? What is there which is not symmetric on the shaft? So in addition to this outer machining profile which is axisymmetric, there is something which in general you have on shaft, which is not. So if there are splines, then they are toothed. So if you consider the spline, you will have a discrete state. So these are not symmetric, although they are circularly repeated, but you cannot obtain this solid by revolving some particular surface. You can extrude it, but you cannot revolve a cross section. So splines or keyways or slots, if you have on the shaft, those you have to ignore. So shaft in general are modeled as axisymmetric bodies, but in that case you cannot take care of this local discontinuity. So how to take care of that, we will see later on. In this analysis, we will be looking into this form. Anybody has any other idea of objects? Tires, okay, that's a good example. So, So tires you will have, in fact just approximating, it will have not a perfect round shape. So this shape could be any other odd shape. So you can have shape which is something like this, which is again revolved. If you ignore the grooves on the tire surface and all, as a body it is an axisymmetric body. So these are the examples of axisymmetric bodies, and analysis of this can be done. That is what we are going to learn, how to analyze these bodies using the axisymmetric analysis, what is called as axisymmetric analysis. In axisymmetric analysis, we use a special type of coordinate system, which is, can you think? So there are three coordinate systems you must have come across in your geometry classes. So first is the Cartesian coordinate system, x, y, z, which we are dealing with. What are the other two types? Polar and Cartesian. So for axisymmetric, which would be more suitable? The polar coordinate system is the one which we will be doing. So what we will be doing in the next classes is we will be analyzing these bodies in terms of polar coordinate system. So in polar coordinate system, you will have a z-axis, which is always treated as axis of revolution. So whatever your body will be revolved about this particular axis. So whatever is axis of revolution, that is treated as z-axis. The axis which is in the radial direction is termed as the radial axis. So note here that this r could be anywhere 360 degrees above the z-axis, and the one which is along the circumference, so that is called as the theta coordinate. So coordinates of a point, instead of x, y, z, you will have r, theta, z. So suppose there is a point on this surface of this particular cylinder, which is denoted here. So let's say it is at height equal to h, it is at radius which is equal to a, and the angle which this point makes. So So let's say a point which is there on this cylinder, which is at distance a from the axis of the body. It is from the zero plane, or that is the origin of the plane. It is at height h, and it makes an angle. So this is called as a theta axis. With respect to a reference theta axis, it makes an angle equal to a degrees. So what will be the coordinates of this point in polar coordinates? Small a, that's right. A degrees and h. So it is always in the sequence r, theta, z. So when somebody says that 1, 2, 3 is your polar coordinates of a point, that means the radius is 1, the angle is 2, and the height is 3. The angle is measured in what units? I have written here degrees. Usually it is not in degrees, but it is in radians. So this theta is always in radians. So whenever some coordinates are given to you, it will be in these coordinates. So the geometry of the body can be expressed in terms of this r, theta, z, and the stress analysis can also be performed using the r, theta, z analysis. So in the next class, we will see how the equilibrium equations, what we learned in Cartesian coordinates, they can be written for the polar coordinate system, and using those equilibrium equations, we will derive the stresses which are in a cylinder. So in the last semester, you have learned cylinder subjected to internal pressure. So here we will generalize that particular derivation. So for any cylinder, so last semester you did thin cylinders. Any thick cylinder, what are the stresses? They can be obtained from the governing equilibrium equation. So that is what we learn. And the second problem we'll consider is rotating bodies. So when bodies are rotating like this fan, so what are the stresses which get generated? So those also can be calculated using the axisymmetric analysis. So those two problems we'll take in the next class.